I have found that my managers really just need me to turn toward them and give them some, I literally drop in, right? They want my energy to come out of my head into my belly, hips, heart, and just be with them.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Turning In podcast. Today, Amy and I spent time with Allison Crow. Allison is a level 1 trained practitioner. She also is a self-leadership business coach. She spends a lot of time coaching business owners, entrepreneurs, and she also just published and authored a book called UNARMORED in the end of 2022. We spent a bunch of time talking about that, as well as talking about the I.F.S community and how sometimes this little niche topic can feel a bit lonely. So I want for anybody listening who is in the I.F.S community, within the I.F.S realm, or wants to create more community, please reach out to us, reach out to Allison, reach out to any of our guests. I really want to encourage us all to get together a little bit more and speak our awesome I.F.S language together. So anyways, I hope that you enjoy this episode and every episode up to this point, and we will go ahead and get right into it. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Turning In podcast. Today, as always, we have Dr. Amy Crawford, and very exciting, we have Allison Crow on. We're going to talk about, honestly, probably a whole slew of topics. First of all, Allison, you are a level 1 trained practitioner with I.F.S. You are titled a self-leadership coach. You speak and work with a lot of business owners, long-term entrepreneurs, things like that, which I'm really excited to get into, talking about different protectors and things that come up in your experience there. And very, very exciting, you just published in December of last year, 2022, a book titled UNARMORED, which is sort of a mixture between memoir, leadership, sharing of yourself and your experience. Welcome to the Turning In podcast, Allison.
Thank you. This is my first I.F.S. I've had people on my podcast, but this is my first, y'all are I.F.S podcast. And so it feels like a really big deal.
You are a very big deal. So we're very happy to have you.
Thank you.
First things first, I always want to, because we are an I.F.S podcast, I always want to know how our guests were introduced, because again, I've said it in the past, there seems to be themes, but everybody's got their own individual experience. So will you start off by sharing what your initial introduction to I.F.S was?
Yes. So as I've been self-employed for 20 years, I've been paid for coaching for 18. I've been coaching since I was 15, like camp counselor, teacher, so trainer and coach, both. And I always thought I was going to be a wife and mom and have 5 kids and adopt 5 kids. And I ended up getting left and started a business. And that was never a part of the thing. And in the last 10 years, I would have these experiences only in business. And looking back, I had them in relationships before, like in dating relationships. And I remember letting a podcast marketing agency go because I had an inner knowing that I just needed, my inside voices, something self-led said, let's take a 3-month sabbatical and some space, because I was kind of evolving who I was and I didn't want to pay $2,300 a month for nothing. And so I went to, this is a person who I had kind of worked for dual relationships, seemed really friendly. We'd gone to a retreat together. And I called her and I said, I wanted to find out what my options were. And I have trauma brain. I didn't know that at the time, but I could sense her ice. I could sense her protectors come out, right? To put it in that language. I didn't know that at the time. And she got really cold and was like, that's not an option, because she'd changed her marketing. And all of a sudden, my adult wise business knows how to have conversations, knows how to handle difficult things person was behind a plexiglass wall, and 3-year-old Allison with her quivering lip was sobbing. And so then I was mortified, like all these shame parts came in, and just like, and I was trying to suck it back, and it just overtook me. And then that reminded me of an episode like 3 or 4 years before that, where a local colleague, I just had a weird incident with her, and she was kind of fangirl, and I went to a networking meeting that she hosted. It was a networking meeting, and I sat in the back, and someone came up and asked me about a program. And before I left, I went and said, hey, find me on Facebook. We'll talk about this at a time. And the next morning, there was a Facebook post that was like, so-and-so has a business, and she used like the soulful living and the language and stuff. And I was like, is that about me? That's not about me, because I didn't do anything wrong. Well, it was about me. But for 3 months, I sat in my backyard pulling weeds. And now the language I put it in now is like, I was having a parts party, and they were. So I reached out to a colleague, Rebecca Ching, who is a level 3 trained and certified I.F.S person. I did not know that. I had just been a colleague of hers in a coaching group. And I knew that she had a background in a 30-year practice, but was now doing coaching. So I knew she would be able to handle whatever this deep stuff was. And she immediately sent me books. I still didn't know about I.F.S. She sent me books, which I picked up and read. We send books to people a lot, and they don't ever read them. And I think the first book I read was this just old school introduction to the internal family.
Oh, yeah.
This was long before No Bad Parts.
Yeah.
And as I started reading it, like right now, even the tingles I have in my body, it filled in so many holes in things I didn't understand. And after coaching, like, why aren't these things that they say are working? Why aren't these things working? And I like to say I wasn't Swiss cheese, because I don't like Swiss cheese, but I was brie with holes in it. And it just softly and creamy filled in those holes. And then I like to say it was our second session. It wasn't. But once I'd had a little bit of understanding, I ran with the education of it. And on one of the early calls, as we got off, she said, oh, by the way, don't coach, teach, or parent your parts. And that was really important, because as a coach and as a strategist, I'm always thinking in solution. And so we worked together for a year. And as soon as I took the circle, I waited on the list. After the circle, I signed up for the continuity program. And, I listened to as many of those as I can, especially the ones that are relevant. I took a coach. I took the coaching class through I.F.S. I took another coaching practice with Brian Jodden. I've just, over the last 3 years, I've immersed myself. And then last year I did finally get in the level 1 training and finished in December also. So I love it.
I love hearing all of that, because it is a little bit, there's so many common threads between how and what I've heard other people's introductory stories. And of course it is individualized. So as you were, and I loved kind of the metaphor for being in your backyard pulling weeds, even though it sounds like that was an actual activity you were participating in. I love kind of the metaphor there. I'm not sure. Did you have any kind of previous background through all of your experience in coaching and teaching and schooling of like the inner child work and things like that, because you use some of that language, and Amy and I have talked about the difference, obviously, you know, between inner child work and I.F.S coaching and leadership. And I don't know, that came up for me when I was listening to you speak.
Yes. So I started out my coaching career with Keller Williams Realty's coaching company. And I was a very successful real estate agent, and I was young, I was divorced. I had to make money, and I was natural at a lot of these things. And so I got trained through them. It's not a technical certification, but we did a coactive coaching model training. And then when I left that, like, you know, I was in this corporate world, and the language I used at the time was like, my soul knew there was something more. And so I quit, and then they hired me back because I was scared. I was terrified. I was scared my husband was going to leave. And we had started living according to his, you know, according to my financial income. And so I went back, and they made me the coach of coaches. But at that time, I kept one foot out of the company. And that's still something I do when I'm in community. I am very, like, we all know or have been accidentally gotten a part of a cult kind of thing. Like, you know, so I always keep one foot somewhere else. Look at you making laugh, throwing your head back laughing.
Amen.
Right. And so I think it's wise to have, you know, not to silo yourself in community. I love community. And so I started working with this really woo-woo lady. I went to her for visual thinking, so graphic recording. And I had gone to her for training. And then when we did visual coach certification with her, she does all this inner child and reparenting, and, you know, it's a version of unburdening. So that was back in 2011. And so I had some of that work. I certainly was not trauma informed. I don't even use the language trauma informed professionally for me, because I haven't been trained in that. I would like to be, you know, I'm layperson trauma informed. But I had early on, even with my hardcore sales clients, I had a couple of small groups that we recognized inner work was where it's what worked. And so it's always been a big part of my even business coaching, because it gets exhausting talking about sales and numbers. And that's not the reason why people aren't making sales and numbers. It's parts.
Which is a wonderful segue into what I want to get into, which is the business, like the self-leadership and business coaching, because you have a shit ton of experience, which is very, very obvious up to this point. However, I wanted to, I had that curiosity as you were doing your intro, and because I also have, you know, previous history in inner child work before being introduced to I.F.S. So I was like, I'm hearing some of that language. I want to know a little bit more.
Yeah, when I quit that job, like way back then, I remember I was like, 4-year-olds don't run businesses. And I'm having this conversation with myself. And at the time I had 3 dogs, and I had this little conversation with the 4-year-old, and I was like, sit outside my office with the dogs. And, I kind of called in my adult negotiator self to have this quitting conversation, because the 4-year-old didn't want to quit. And let me give you one final outcome, actually. So I found out later, a year later, I was diagnosed with ADHD, and I was diagnosed with ADHD because I was searching these symptoms, which was rejection sensitive dysphoria. And I want to let your listeners know, my system loves labels for organizing, not for pathologizing, but my system loves labels, and my parts all have like a white sticker with a generic title, and they just, it's the opposite of chaos to them. And so I'm happy to label myself with RSD. But the last time, actually I have 2. So last year in May, I had a very potential professional RSD situation. And instead of 3 months, it was 20 minutes. And I had one last week at my live event. and I was 1,000% in self, and my parts, I was checking in with my parts, like, aren't you freaking out? And they're like, no, we're out by the pool. So I have results of something that I have struggled with a lifetime and would consume months of overthinking and anxiety and deep sadness and stress and confusion, that I.F.S has given me the tools to absolutely lead myself in those situations without disassociating. It's so cool.
It's so cool. And like, it is evidence-based, right? You
Right?
have evidence, we have anecdotal, we have all sorts of research and evidence to show that this
Mhm.
does and can work. You said something interesting, which is that 4-year-olds don't run businesses. And
Mhm.
I feel like there's a lot of 4-year-old parts running businesses.
There are. I've seen it for 20 years.
Well, right. And so I want to hear a little bit about, because I mean, we've all got parts, right? So let's get into like the I.F.S and the business
In
coaching
the
a little bit.
business, yeah.
Oh, and the business aspect of things. So are there common threads that you see with people that come to you, whether it's like a common issue they're coming with because they don't have an I.F.S lens, and you get to kind of like help coach them into that language and that stuff? Is there sort of a common thread that you can identify or have identified?
It's so like in business coaching, in the Instagram memes, you hear like, what are your blocks and your resistance?
Mhm.
So there's that piece. The other piece is, and by the way, I used to be this, the positivity bypassing. And so, like, I was born into a coaching community that had a hand signal that was like, don't be a victim, and would put a little V with their hand on their heads. And there was just so much leadership shame in my company and then in the coaching world afterwards. And everything I taught was taught. And I remember reading Wayne Dyer's book. Like, he was one of my early heroes because he was a researcher. The back of it, he was a psychologist. And, change your thinking, change your life. And in a lot of ways, changing my thinking did open a lot of things up, but then I would hit a dead end. And my particular psychology is what a lot of my clients' psychology is. My clients are head led. They think they're open-hearted. So really good, kind, tender people. I thought I was heart led forever. My heart was so fucking closed. But our head and our brilliance and our achievement is our coping skill. And that's manager led like a mofo. And because it's rewarded by society. But what we're doing is we're excelling over here on the left, but on the right, we're shoving these things down and we're praying over them or meditating over them, or whatever way you push them down. And for me, I used to test as an Enneagram 7. There's no way I'm an Enneagram 7. I don't know what Enneagram I am. I think I'm a 5. I haven't done enough research, but I am not. But that is like, I can look over my shoulder and see little Allison, who is trying to be positive and happy and fun so that she be loved. And now I'm an old cranky information bitch. Sounds like an Enneagram 5. So yes, what the common thread is, so obviously there's all kinds of business people, but my people feel, we call it, they're gardeners, not machines, and they feel a little social pressure to build a machine, and yet they don't. So this is the other thing. A lot of my clients are like, I'm 51. A lot of my clients, because I got diagnosed, are getting diagnosed with ADHD, and we're realizing, or they have kids. And so there's this intersection of understanding parts and managers. So we don't even get into exiles. These managers are so, they're so managery, and they are, so I get to do a little bit of teaching because, and a client yesterday said this. She said, she's a newer client. So I was explaining that I kind of do a little dance of a little bit of teaching. I call it the front porch. Like I give them a little bit of the framework because information helps my client's nervous system relax a little bit. And then when I sense that they're relaxed, we've talked about what's going to happen. And then I call it turn, we'll cultivate a little self, and I turn the shoulders of self to that part for presence. And that is very uncomfortable for my clients. So I kind of do this dance of educating. They all identify in their identity as I love to learn new things. So that's the door we go through. And then it's like, would you like to experience this? And so business owners, procrastination, overthinking, avoid getting ready to get ready, like any uncomfortable pricing, doing sales calls and handling objections, being able to rest and slow down.
That's the one that has been going through my mind since you started speaking, is this like what I see on social media. I tend to follow lots of like motivational stuff, all of that stuff. And it seems like today it's hustle, 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 grind, grind, grind. We all have the same 24 hours in a day. So what are you doing with it? It's like this really...
I've got to get you a different feed, honey.
Oh yeah, no, my algorithm is all sorts of whack right now based on some recent life experiences.
That used to be mine, like back when Gary Vee was, and actually to me, Gary Vee right now he's really talking about kindness and authenticity, but his message used to be hustle, and it makes my skin crawl and my breastplate hurt physically.
Me too, because it doesn't allow for exactly what you're talking about, which is the breadth of the human experience and the allowance for all of our slowing down to be welcomed and our turning in, right? For lack of better terminology. It's so manager driven. And so I'm not surprised, I guess, to hear, these things that you're naming off as common threads, because I think in society it is such a welcomed narrative. And again, maybe that has to do with my algorithm, but I don't
all the
think
tools
so.
We are taught in traditional coaching, and it's such a broad field now. And I'm certainly not one of the first coaches in the world, but I've seen it change a lot, especially in the online years. And a lot of training is being, people say, "Oh, I'm coaching." You're not coaching, you're training. And the tools that we are typically given are manager-led tools. They're not holistic. They're protective. They're not. So a client said to me last week, I have heard "be you" for 20 years, and this is the first time anybody's actually showed me or taught me how to be you. Slow down to speed up is there's all these coachy phrases that you can hear, but they just sound like sound bites. But I explain it like yoga. I used to do Bikram yoga. It would be a joke if I tried it right now. But I remember my teacher would come and slightly ask for permission, put his hands on my hips and slightly adjust so that I'm building a better muscle memory. And this is like that. We have such a strong, and use that as a metaphor and literally muscle memory for these bypassing manager way solutions. And then clients are frustrated and feel shame because it only works as long as the dopamine hit works. And so they're building businesses on dopamine hits, and that's a disaster in itself. And so I'm actually coming in them and kind of explaining what we're going to do And then I come in and I just help them make a slight adjustment. And then the biggest thing is, y'all know this, practice is what works. Because I always say, like, you can hear this and you can have this session, but if you do not spend time, like, you've got to spend time with these parts. And someone asked me last week, because y'all, I just set down $300,000 worth of business in my business. Like, I just closed it like an insane woman. But I just knew. And one of my clients was like, how are you not freaking out? And I said, well, two things. One, I know my skill and I have the skills to create clients. Now, my parts would have freaked out, but I have spent hours and hours and hours with these parts. And not to be it's not about cocky, but like, it's Wednesday and I've listened to 4 hours of I.F.S sessions, like one of those continuity classes. And it's on in the background. I'm not like sitting here studying, but I'm immersing myself in the study and the practice because it works. And that's the one thing I see most business people, they're like, oh, this is wonderful. And then they run away until the next like seminar or class, but they haven't implemented. I call it nourishing practices instead of habits. Yeah.
Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. Well, what I have curiosity over, and please, I mean, I asked for your time. We asked for your time, and I don't want to ask too much, but I really want to know some of those nourishing practices, because what we're talking about are individuals, are people and individuals who don't, I mean, maybe generally, right, don't have the I.F.S language. And so you really are training and teaching them some of this lingo that they may not be familiar with, but you have all of this knowledge and you're trying to have them turn their shoulders towards this understanding. So what are some of those nourishing practices that help someone who may not be super delved into I.F.S or familiar with the language to actually be able to turn towards what we know as self-leadership and coaching? I don't know if it was a layered question, but I think you're catching what I'm
it's important. And because I go through an intellectual lens, and because many of my clients, I see this, it's really cute. I do it too. I have an I.F.S therapist. I love when he catches me, because we can talk about parts instead of two parts. And so we can start intellectualizing and processing. And most of my clients are women. I occasionally have men. Men tend to do my one-on-one more than my group stuff. But I use the example with them. I say you're with a male partner at the doctor and you are the patient, and the doctor is talking to your spouse, not you. I said, that's what this is like. So it is really important. So like, I have to really slow them down and help them see, that a intellectualizing or an analyzing part will come in. And then, we can't say, oh, your analyzing part came in, because then there's shame. So it's like, we spend a lot of time with the, how do you feel about that? How do you feel about that? And getting these managers to back up. And there's a lot of permission. There's a lot of, you all can stay in the room, that kind of thing. And to really hone in on one part. And I'm getting to nourishing practices. So one of the first things we do is I encourage them to maybe if they like journaling. I mean, journaling is huge, and start identifying the parts that show up. You don't have to go in, but I use the analogy, and they all get this. I like, say you're the new CEO of a corporation and it's 6 stories high and there's a couple of basements. And to really run this company, you're going to do it from your heart-centered and heart-led place. And that all kind of wakes them up because they want to be that way. And I said, so you're going to take time to get to know your C-suite. You're going to take time to get to know your manager level. And, there's a whole money organization. There's people in the basement, and you're not going to be able to do it all in a day. But imagine you just have this really relaxed space of being, and you're just going to give yourself a year, maybe 2, to really just gently, naturally, slowly get to know people. And you're carrying around your little notebook that says, I met Megan and Amy today. And so they're kind of like, get them taking an inventory, and also teaching if I can slow them down enough without shame to notice the difference between noticing that part and then dropping. This is the language we use because my clients are familiar with it. Dropping in. So this is the way I've made I.F.S mine. This is my yellow heart. It's a part of my brand. I was a 16-year-old drawing yellow hearts instead of red hearts because everybody drew red and pink hearts, and fuck that. I want to be different. So it started out very parts led, and it's a part of my brand, and it symbolizes, even before I.F.S, it symbolizes what self is, right? I didn't have that language. And so like at my retreat last week, I had everybody draw a prayer flag. And I said, my heart is yellow, but what color? And we talk about what self is. And I have them anchor into what color is their most pure heart self, like their inner wise self. So I have a client that hers is turquoise blue. So when I communicate with her, we slow down and I'm like, let's activate your blue heart. And that language really, like, they can get that. And it's like, slowly turn on the dimmer switch. I said, you don't need to be that's the other thing. You tell my clients, we just need 10% of self. Their shoulders drop 4 inches because in their brain, they think they have to get to 100% self. That's the mind of the people I'm working with. Right. And so it's like, we just need 5%. Let's just get the dimmer switch on. We don't have to have bright lights. And they're slowing down their system. And I recently had a client text me from the Amazon when I shut this program down. She was a leadership client in a more advanced circle. And I opened up my one-on-one roster, and she found 2 bars in the Amazon and texted me and said, I want that first spot. She just started 1 year was introduced to I.F.S. She goes, we're just getting started. Right? Like, it's a longer, they don't have to do it with me, but it's a longer journey because she's just now clicking into this somatic reality. So, but I see so much hope. I get teary because I see how hard these people are trying. I see how hard they are on themselves inside that no one sees. And I can help them with that. I can teach them and then take their little hips like a yoga teacher. And okay, so the nourishing practices. Thank you for letting me have lots of words. One of the things when I talk about my own nourishing practices, I want people to understand that these were stacked over a long period of time. So please don't. I'll give y'all a little colorful PDF your people can use.
Awesome.
No opt-in anything. They just download it. I have a poster on my wall of my personal nourishing practices. And if you look at it without understanding the context, you're going to go, well, that's too fucking hard. I'm not going to be able to do it. And so the first thing I ask people to do is, what do you do regularly that works for you? Right? Like, I get up, I take my thyroid medicine. I have to wait 20 minutes for coffee. I pee. I don't brush my teeth before coffee. I look at my phone for 20 minutes, which this is exactly what I do. Okay. I'm not one of these people that does the miracle fucking morning.
Lemon water and yeah.
The coaching thing. I hope this is fun for your listeners. I know a lot of, most of the world is therapy, but
Oh no,
And then
I'm not a therapist either. So I'm having a blast. So don't,
cool.
yeah. I'm like, so don't.
So, then I go in and I put on my face and makeup every single day. And I wear these baseball t-shirts. I have 50 of them. They say breathe, y'all. I wear them almost every single day. And I do it for neurodivergent reasons. It's just comfortable. I feel kind of cute. I know it's cheesy, but it's what I feel physically comfortable in. I wear jeans almost every single day, and I put on my sneakers almost every single day. These are actually practices that support my nervous system. And which, if you knew how I grew up, you would just chuckle. And then when I come into my office, I'm an empty nester. I'm also have a history of success. So I am not in the hustle of building my business. I have cultivated a life where I have space. It is mandatory. And so the first 3 hours of my day, they're not hardcore, but I call it me time. And I come into this office. I do look at a little bit of, I kind of check in, so that's not on my mind. And then I open my journals and I turn on some music. And after my nervous system is kind of set, I kind of scan for parts. I scan for self. Sometimes I write every single day, right? And so for someone new to it with I.F.S, if you know the model, just journal, just do a 5-minute parts check-in. If you don't know the model, I send all my clients to the Jay Early book, Self-Therapy. And I tell them to get the actual book and then to get the audio book and the workbook by he and Bonnie Weiss, because the workbook is like something concrete they can work through. I paint. But for my first year of I.F.S, I had a journal that said my internal family. And I gave it its own space. And I just, my anxious part. Right. So mine is kind of messy. It's frayed on the edges. I am not able to meditate in the way traditional people meditate. I work on stillness, but I need to be coloring or painting. So journal. I do think hearing I.F.S sessions is helpful for me and my clients. Here's the thing. A lot of times it's therapy sessions. And so it's not, but it does help them understand moving towards those parts. I would love for there to be a little more business sessions, and I will probably I have a few out there, and I will probably put a few more on my podcast. But I think because I'm a newer practitioner, I've been a little scared of doing it wrong.
No, that's fair. I mean, I would love if you were to do that, because I think it would be really interesting to listen to myself and, implement and understand a little bit more. Really,
let me show this real quick. And I know that your listeners can't see this, but I'm going to put this little poster, and I have a blank one, and it just has these little watercolor bubbles. And it's really important for people to start with what they're already doing that works. So I have things like read books, walk every day, sleep, right? Like if you're sleeping, you already get to put this on here. I don't want someone to feel like something like this is empty and they have to fill it up. But I have parts, presence, and care daily on here. And do I work through the 6S with these parts? I have found that my managers really just need me to turn toward them and give them some, I literally drop in, right? They want my energy to come out of my head into my belly, hips, heart, and just be with them. And then I will is anything up for you today? Do you have any fears and concerns? And a lot of my managers are really relaxed now. when I get woken up at night, I turn over on my pillow as if somebody is there, and I'm like, hello, anxiety. I see you. I won't leave you. I'm here for you. You're waking me up. What's going on? And they tell me, and I say, yeah, that's really concerning. I get it. And we've got to sleep so that we can handle that in the morning. And they let me sleep. But I have to, it's that moment. Here's the best way to put it. I have a dog, down to one right now. She is anxious. She wants closeness, but wants independence. She's kind of a tricky dog. And that dog will come up to me and paw her. She will knock my hand out of my phone, and she will take my glasses off my face and is essentially saying, be present with me, Mom. She's my little Buddha teacher. And a lot of small business owners that I work with are really intellectually driven. And so that slow down, just sitting on the front porch is a huge deal. They're not at a place where they need unburdening. They just need their managers to relax.
Yeah, they need.
And so they get frustrated because they're like, it's this simple? And I'm like, it's simple, but it's not easy, because it's simple in your head, but the muscle memory is the muscle. We need practice, and we need practice together.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, it's that, and I want to talk about the book here in a second, because there's a lot of juice there too, but it really is just that glimmer. Like, they need that glimmer of self through all of the manager and the hustle and bustle and all of that I think comes with really any industry, or being a higher, a entrepreneur or a high achieving person in any industry. So it sounds like you're able to provide that with tons of different tools. I would love to be able to provide our listeners with some of the tools that you have shared already. I think, having a downloadable, and I love that little watercolor. The creativity, right? The creativity parts exercises are big. Let's move into the book though, because again, that's a pretty recent, really rad achievement, published December 2022, Unarmored. Talk a little bit about because it's also very heavily, I think you even described it as like heavily sprinkled with I.F.S. And even so far in the discussion, everything seems very I.F.S. informed without all of the hard stop lingo, I guess, that can throw people off. So I think that's wise in some ways.
Yeah, as I listened to a lot of therapists, and even the way Rebecca worked with me, and I listened to Rebecca Ching has a podcast too called The Unburdened Leader. So she's doing leadership, and every once in a while I hear it in there, and I'm just much more direct with the framework with my clients, because it's what works for my system. And y'all, my philosophy of my business is build what works for me, and then the right people. Someone said, do you want feedback? And I said, why would I want feedback? I don't want to change what I'm doing to please everybody. I mean, there's feedback and there's feedback, and I don't want that kind of feedback. So Unarmored starts the day after the election. And I was in the middle of an expressive arts certification that was 28 days long, over 4 retreats. And I was she's a former therapist, and we use art, and we use process-based art. So that's the other thing. I'm a process expert, not right. Like it's about the practice and the process. That's how you get the results. And everybody wants the buy now button, but they don't want to do the practice. And I went to bed thinking I was going to wake up and we were going to have our first woman president. And I have some family history with Fox News and QAnon and Trump. That's unpleasant. And we all woke up. There were 12 of us. We all woke up devastated, but then we had to go on with our curriculum. And in that process, each of us were teachers, and one of the teachers shushed me in a workshop. And I bit my tongue, and I know how to facilitate children and adults, and you don't even shush children. And it just sat brewing and brewing and brewing. And so we did the exercise, and then it came time for feedback, and I gave a round of really constructive, manager-led feedback. And then I fucking unleashed on her. Like, my rage just was like, out of the way, bitch, we're getting her. And nothing physical, but and then I was mortified because my rage popped out. And that woman, Chris Seidel is her name. Chris Seidel, her nervous system was a calming presence. And I was like, I got to get out of here. I'm leaving. And she came and she said, just sit with me on the porch for a minute. She said, you can leave. I hope that you don't, but you can leave. And she said, you can also be angry. And she was like the first person to give me permission in the personal development world that wasn't shameful. And she never once condemned my behavior. Nothing. And then the painting itself is about the same kind of thing. Like, we're learning. I didn't realize that at a time, but it's a self-trust exercise. And that's what I.F.S is, self-trust. And so it's memoir-ish, it's leadership-ish, but I'm really coming across, I think, more as a big sister or a next door neighbor, like, not so much this, I'm not coming from my most credentialed place. I'm coming from human learning and permission. And long before I met I.F.S, I was always, quote, famous for authenticity because I had a pink streak in my hair when nobody had a pink streak in my hair, or I wore tennis shoes, because, like, little things that are just expressions. And so the book is kind of the stories of how I began speaking to myself instead, and uncovering, how do we trust ourselves? You can't trust yourself you can't be yourself if you don't trust yourself. And you can't trust yourself if you don't know yourself. And so I encounter a lot of these parts in that book, and language and tools that I use and stories to help people be more compassionate, especially in the way they speak to themselves. I'm really proud of it. And then when I was done, it's kind of how I deconstructed from spiritual bypassing and became human. And then at the very end, like, spirit kind of came back in and zapped me one day when I was watching TV. Yes, TV and TikTok are a big part of my business. I know, Amy's laughing. And I had a heart attack. And then I wrote the last chapter in the conclusion. Amy, your face is oh my God, right? I had a heart attack, 100% from stress, no blockages. That's a whole nother story of all of the things that happened last year. And I had the heart attack, like, right as I'm finishing the very last of the book. We published the book, and then I have one more huge insight that I didn't get to put in the book, but it is about deconstructing all those protectors. And yes, it's unarmored, but it's not unboundaried. And I think that could be the next book, is like, okay, how do we open our hearts? But this is not about just emotional mess everywhere. It's about whys and listening to the information our emotions have for us and building a relationship. And then after I did that, the next phase is like, oh, boundaries. What am I available for? What am I not for? And then what are the skills of using those boundaries in everyday life? And so it is, my heart is unarmored, but boundaries are my shield. And that's the piece that's missing at the end of the book, or the next book. But I want people to have permission to feel human, really, especially when they're in leadership roles, because there's a whole bunch of fucking fake leaders out there. And the pantyhose and the shoulder pads have got to go. The Spanx have got to go, metaphorically. So I try to be the kind of leader I needed, which was like, I'm struggling and this is how I'm handling my struggle, instead of everything's perfect in front of the stage. And then behind the stage, it's a shit show. That's a lot of words. I told you I had a lot of words.
No, I love that. And I want to pass it to Amy here. And something that I love about what you just said is, I mean, to me, any truly successful leader in my life, and that I strive to be as well, as they're decision makers, but they're also going to be able to take accountability when they make mistakes. And that is part of being human, and allowing ourselves to, in all of the shame parts and all of, maybe we don't have to show that to everyone, like you're saying, with the boundary, being emotionally boundaried. And they have support people. They have their people that they're able to, that have their marbles in the jar, right? That I think Brene Brown talks about. And they're able to allow the entirety of the human experience within leadership, and then still show up in a self-led way. So I just love that. And I know I saw Amy on mute here, and I want to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit.
Well, yeah, and I've mostly just been enjoying watching you both vibing off each other, so I don't have a boatload to say. It's just been fun to be a voyeur and listen and watch. And I am both saddened to hear you had a heart attack, Allison, and shocked, and also strangely grateful that that insight didn't make it into the book, mostly because I think it deserves a whole separate piece. To be honest with you. Self-led boundaries is one of my areas of passion, and we're actually going to probably, Megan and I together, just do an episode around starting the conversation with that, because that is so critical. And I think it's so important what you said about this idea of being both unarmored and having boundaries. Those two can and need to exist together, right? And I think that's an area that gets really muddy, yucky, disgusting in a lot of this fields, regardless of coaching or therapy, where it's like, oh yes, be compassionate. And somehow societally, there's this belief that being compassionate means having shit boundaries. No, that's not the case, right? So I'm actually super excited to hear that might be part 2.
Well, and I'm willing to admit where I'm new and I'm a beginner. And I was confident enough to talk about I.F.S. in this book because of my time on task and my dramatic experience and results personally. And I'm not ready. I'm ready to write about the things I'm learning about boundaries, but I'm not at the place where you publish that in a book as an authority on it yet. And so I do have a style of leadership. Like, it's not about, like, I may tell my clients, I don't speak from the place I'm in. I speak from the lessons I'm learned, but I usually don't wait 6 years to talk about it, right? I may tell my clients, like, last week I had this, and this is what I experienced. Last week at my conference, they said, can you share the way you talk to yourself when you're managing parts or when you're caring for parts? They wanted to hear that specific. And what I found is very similar to a story I write about in the book. And I think this lady, she texted me out of the blue the other day. It freaked me out. But I remember being 32 years old, and I was on a panel of coaches at my, at one of these conferences with 14,000 people. And I was doing a really good job. And I loved the work. And of course I love the acknowledgement. And I don't remember the question, but somebody asked a question. I said, well, I have struggled with depression and was diagnosed with depression and anxiety at 19. And this work is a part of that healing journey. Like, this work really helps me do that. I was a sales coach at the time. And we finished, and I went out to get a cup of coffee, and I turned over my shoulder, and there was a line of 99 people waiting to talk to me. All other coaches, all saying, me too, me too, me too. They had never told anybody. And there are so many mental health me toos in the business world that are covered up by these high-performing, society-pleasing managers. And so I'm so thankful that there's groups of people that work with firefighter-led and exile stuff, but these managers are suffocating. The managers are struggling, and the human inside is struggling because they're so manager-driven, and those coping skills are rewarded by capitalism, by sexism, by racism, by all the systems. That's the other thing I'm trying to introduce, a little systems with clients, like trying to explain the air they breathe.
Like legacy burdens.
Yes, exactly. I haven't used that term with them. I'm really just kind of mapping some things for them. And I always say, this is not about woe is me, capitalism, even though it kind of is. But it's like, I want you to see the reason, it's not about shame, blame, and fault, but it's about, I want you to see the engineering. And if you see the engineering of the way society is engineered, and business is engineered, and religion is engineered, and racism is engineered, then you have data and information about how to lead yourself and others in the context of that system, maneuvering it. So, I recently claimed the phrase advanced personal development because God bless Mel Robbins. And I know a lot of people love her. I think I would drink beer with her just fine. And there are people that have a one-to-many audience. I speak in too many circles and complexities and layers, but my people love it.
I love it. I think, so Amy and I, the whole purpose of this, the main purposes of this podcast was to get I.F.S out there. Mm-hmm. And I think, it sounds like you've done a really, really cool job in curtailing and getting this message to people without, like I said earlier, I know obviously you know the terminology, you use the terminology. However, it is that introduction to like the glimmer of self without having to say, okay, go to this 16-hour Dick Schwartz training and get introduced. You know what I mean? It's like you can still have the results by slowly introducing, and it is going to take a long time for those people that do speak your language. They're entering in on a years, hopefully lifelong journey of getting to know their parts and the systems. And one other thing that I want to say that I really is kind of unrelated, but also related, that I love that you shared is like, you work with largely manager-driven individuals. Sorry, my cat's meowing for anybody that can hear that. And it's not about saying you managers need to like stop and go away, right? It's about allowing, again, for the full breadth of the human experience, realizing that those managers have a very, very positive intent, positive role, and have really driven the system to the success in some ways up to this point, while also allowing them to say like, okay, now to pivot in your success in this next level, you need to slow down, turn in, and see what else is going on. And I don't know, I just really enjoy.
It's so
I enjoy cute. You and what you do.
One yesterday was like, excuse me, this sounds too simple and we are not getting duped. Trying to connect somebody with their body. And I was like, okay, we're going to this dude. And we spent some time, and my client said it was a little short man. And it was, he was very concerned. And I said, hey, let me show you my I.F.S skills book. And here on page 1, I want to tell you this thing we're teaching you about, that we recognize what your job is, and that we are not here to fire you. And to see the delight of both my client and the manager go, you mean I've been doing this since I was 6 years old? And you're 53 now? and it took the manager a while, but like he really could get like, oh, I would like an updated job, right? Like I would,
Mm-hmm.
I've been doing this for all this time without a promotion. Yeah, we want to take some things off your plate and give, and using that language, it's a metaphor, but it's also very I.F.S-y, right? So it fits in these places in personal and coaching development, even in sales. Like if someone came to me wanting to increase their sales, it is not, they're all like, oh, you need to make your calls. I see these voices come out making fun of all this shit I've done for years. Right. But there's a reason, there's a part that is interfering with it. And I see beautiful results with clients who are willing. And a lot of clients look at me and go, this is really hard. But then other clients are up for, it's like, we call it the hard you choose in business, because as a business owner, it is the hard you choose. Stop wanting it to be easy. I tell my clients that all the time. I'm so tired of the metaphysical world. It's like, I want ease. Oh, go fuck yourself. We are humans. I get it. We all want ease. And some things we're missing life. I told a girlfriend from, I don't even know where, she's a high school, and we were talking about my husband's mode. Like he has a nice edge. There's a whole psychology around a good edged yard. And she said, I'm sitting with my mother. Things are chaotic. And we were talking about how the edge represents order. And she said, things are chaotic. And I'm sitting with my mother who's dying. And I said, Julie, you're living in the wild edges. If you are sitting with your dying mother and just being present with her one breath at a time, you are living in the wild edges. And the opposite of the wild edges, and I texted her a picture, and I went and found this the other day, of those plastic containers at the Container Store. And I said, these are great for your pantry, but they're not great for human life. So I love them for your yard and organizing your supplies in your pantry. But most people are in those plastic containers. I call them the narrows. And I said, I just want to honor and recognize that you sitting in the chaos. I said, that's different than the chaos of laundry. That is the chaos of human experience, and you're doing it. That's wild edges. And she was like, that I think it felt really good to her, but we're so afraid. We crawl back out into those little plastic boxes to be safe. And I just want people, and my people happen to be in the business world. I want my clients say, is that normal? Is that normal? In their heads 1,000 times a day. They're afraid. Am I doing it wrong? 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 And there is some compassion, and there is some courage, and there is slinging paint creativity and using words, and there's all those C's. I have C stickers. I made merch. I'm a cornball.
That's awesome. But also your book is sectioned off with the C's of self, which I love.
Yes.
Right. So
we're not all there, but my editing manager was like, these are the sections. And it also has my art, and it also has a larger font for those of us who can't see. Like, I don't know if
I appreciated that.
You get into middle life and you buy a book and you're so excited to have the book in your hands, not a screen. And even with your glasses, you can't read. So I told the publisher, I was like, nope, up it some more. So it's also a very creative, I think it was meant to give a very creative experience, a multi-sensory experience to take in some of these ideas.
Well, I will absolutely link your book, your podcast, your website, your coaching services, all of the wonderful, beautiful things that you do in our show notes, so our listeners can get a hold of it and get a hold of you if the stars align, because I think what you're doing is really rad and really important, and it's got an immense amount of depth. Even though I continue to say like it's sort of that glimmers of self, it's like that doesn't negate the fact that you are helping people change the direction of their lives and their success. I think I don't know. I really enjoyed this conversation. I think it's really, really interesting, and something that you just said that I just want to touch on before we get into some of our cool closing things. I want to hear about your Spotify songs and all of that is like these systems, so the narrows, you were talking about the narrows and the containers and the messy edges of the human experience that we've all been through, right? And I think bringing it back to I.F.S, it's like those systems are those containers in some ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're a little bit more, probably a little bit more wild than that, but it's like realizing and being able to take a step back. Again, these systems were born out of wanting to provide a sense of safety and allowing for that understanding while also being able to pivot and get to know and create relationship. I think that's really the juice, right? That's the whole point. So
let me tell you two more quick things. I show my clients, and I'll link this for you so your people can find it. It's 2 minutes and 46 seconds. I also took compassionate inquiry training with Gabor Mate. These all just fit. And he, in his workshop, shared a video called the Still Face Experiment. And it is a mother that pulls her presence away from the child, and the child fawns, fights, and then closes in. And I show that to my clients. And so I let them watch it, and then we walk through it, and I show them how this 9-month-old child without language creates coping skills. Like I show them the physical, I have them watch the physical creation of a part. We don't know what part it is, but you see that part take on that role in the disconnection. And that it viscerally, once they can get past like their motherness of, oh, I don't want the baby to hurt. I said, you are the baby. You are the baby. And so it's such a, it's a real-time showing of what connection and disconnection does to human beings. And it's not about disconnection. It's about the lack of repair, because we will all experience disconnection. And so with my clients, I'm really trying to teach them using self to repair. And then the other thing I wanted to say, that as a coach, and I know there are other coaches out there, but I'm really lonely. I'm really hungry for peers to exchange ideas and I love parts mapping, but all the coaching education is like, here's the map of the parts. And maybe it's because I'm a professional mapper drawer or was in a past life, right? But like the nuance of I watch the conversations in the groups and with the professionals, and gosh, I'm lonely for business-centered, coaching-centered conversations around with the lens of I.F.S. And Rebecca asked me she was like, I really think you could teach something at the conference. And I almost put something together, but I had to rush too much. So I was like, next year, maybe I will, but I'm just saying this because I want to call in other people that are interested in, I know there's people thinking about these things, and they're probably feeling lonely professionally around that too. So yeah.
Well, and I know you said coaches. I even think that's a thing in the therapy world. I mean, as a therapist, I feel lonely in those same ways. You know? So I see those parts of yours and resonate with them fully.
I don't need more clients. I mean, I do need more clients, but I have really expensive rates, and I'm only doing one-on-one now, and they're year-long agreements. And this is one of the reasons I closed down my group, because I said, I'm tired of leading people in masses. I need peers. Right? Thank you for saying that, Amy. Yeah. We need each other, and I don't know what the form or the way it is. I don't know the best way to do it. I'm Erin, who is the one who I think told y'all, Erin Baker, Dr. I call her Erin, or called them Erin, Dr. E. And so far that's been my only, like, we text and talk and those kind of things. And everything else I see out there is, you know, for of course, guarded and natural and all those things. But man, I'd love to have a small forum somewhere where we can exchange ideas and, you know,
Yeah.
So this is the call out / call in to all of our listeners who want an I.F.S. community.
Well, but I think also for me, I want it to be more like, how can we do it
unarmored
in the sense of, like, can we have a real conversation? And I get, like, sometimes, you know, everybody's got rules about confidentiality and all these other things. And so it just all feels so constricted, and we can all go out and hire a consultant, but I think there's beautiful ideas to exchange without breaking rules, but we have to be willing to show up and say, here's what I'm doing really great. Here's what I'm struggling with. Does anybody, you know, or this is so cool. I watched this happen. And I just like telling my husband, and he's just going, baseball.
Well, I hear a need, I sense a need, and let's see what happens based on externalizing it. Let's see where it goes.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for having me and letting me talk about business.
Oh, you're welcome. And we're not quite done yet.
Oh, that's right. You have your ending question.
Excuse me. Thank you so much for being on, honestly, and talking about business. I think it's brilliant and really interesting. And yes, Erin, you know, we love them. So absolutely good shout out there. I want to know, Allison, so this Turning In podcast has a shared Spotify playlist. Could you name a song or two that you would like us to add and that your system has been jamming out to recently or not so recently, whatever?
Yes.
Full freedom.
I gave y'all two in the email, and I'm going to give you one more, and I'll have to look it up and see it. The first one, and these are in the order that I experience them, but the first one, I don't know the name of the song, but it's by Ludicio Inwaldi, and I'm slaughtering his name, but I call it the slow tango song. And I, in 2013, saw a colleague at a conference during a break dance with this guy, and it was a tango, but it was this music and it was slow. And I was like, my whole body was like, there's the metronome, there's my tempo. Slow down doesn't have to mean lounge on a chase and do nothing. It can still be a vibrant, sexy dance, but at a different pace. And so today I have a little higher tempo because I allowed my really excited to be on y'all's podcast parts to come and play with me.
Perfect.
All right. And then, so that I'll give you that one. I'll just have to give it to you. I listened to that. Someone said, how did you calm your nervous system? I said, I listened to this song. Spotify says, lady, you have a problem. You've listened to one song 7,000 times. But I retrained my nervous system, like it was part of my nervous system base point healing over a long period of time. I've moved on to a different song. Then my second song is Willie and Lucas Nelson, Breathe. And listen, y'all, I'm not a breath expert, but I have always intuitively known, and I would tell my clients, I start sessions, I said, let's take a breath together and connect our energies. And I, breathe, y'all. One of my clients told me that, and that's how we ended up with the t-shirts. They've just
50 baseball jerseys, actually 50.
I have so many. Well, what happens is I had a brand new one on yesterday, and I made coffee, and I stood too close to the Nespresso machine, and it spit coffee on me, or I spilled red wine on them. So, So the Breathe song by Willie Nelson and Lucas Nelson, who is his son. I'm a 7th generation Texan, liberal. I am liberal. I'm a little blue dot in this red fucked up state. I do not endorse Texas politics. I fight against it. And, but it's just such a beautiful father, son. And I'm pretty sure I was conceived to Willie Nelson. He's in my bones and blood. And I've seen him in concert my whole life. And then the last one. So music is not my language. words are my language, but music, I'm a little like, but wobble, which is a rap song, and I think it's pretty filthy.
I know. That's the one I'm familiar with of these
Okay,
three.
but this is what my client, so I have a real gift of being able to use analogy and metaphor that lands in my clients' systems. Like, this is what I call the front porch. I can't get you into my living room or into my kitchen if I can't get you off the street into my front porch. So wobble, when I talk, weebles wobble and they don't fall down. And I think I'm a little bit older than y'all. I'm Gen X, but when we were little, there were weeble wobbles, and it was a little toy you had. I'm going to start sending them to all my clients. I want them to have a desk, because so many of that narrows you're either miserable and suffering or everything's fine. And there's no space for the wobble. And the wobble, learning to be in the wobble is self-leadership. I tell my clients, you are not going to eliminate doubt and fear. You are going, I call it be with skills, terms I make up on the fly. Like, these are the skills of being with the parts of you that are wobbling. You're next to each other. This is not about eliminating here's self and here's your part. So that wobble song was the only song I played at one time at my event. I'm just not real talented at music, and I don't think in that, but we stood up and did a break, and there's a line dance to it and all this stuff. But me and my clients were like, oh yeah, wobble. And so now they have language for themselves, and they're like, how are you? And they're like, I'm in a wobble. And instead of going, I'm doing it wrong, or shame, they're like, I'm in a wobble, and they have a neutral response to it. So I love the wobble song because it's a somatic, right?
I'm so excited to have that song on our playlist.
Wobble, 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 wobble. And weebles wobble, but they don't fall down.
Yes.
So
I love that.
It's nice that's the playfulness of self, is like, let's white girl boogie. We have no rhythm, but let's do it anyway.
Let's wobble, baby, wobble, baby.
Wobble, baby, wobble.
Allison, where can people find you? I know that you have a very active social media. I saw your most recent post about the red light therapy and laughed literally out loud last night. Where can people see all of your fun content?
I love Instagram. So Allison with 2 L's _Crow on Instagram. My home base is Facebook. If you send me a friend request to my personal profile, send me a message. Do not fucking pitch me, but send me a message that says, I heard you on the podcast. I will gladly accept your friendship. I have 2,000 friend requests, and I do not accept them unless people introduce themselves to me. But that's my home base. I have TikTok. I've been experimenting with it. I'm awkward at it. And then my webpage is AllisonCrow.com. And everything's there. But I love Instagram and Facebook. I tried LinkedIn, but I don't really belong on LinkedIn. I have too many foul words.
Well, I will link everything other than maybe your LinkedIn.
You can link LinkedIn if somebody wants to come to LinkedIn. And I think I have something for those business people, but I'm a little rough around the edges, and I'm okay. I am totally too much, and I love it. I'm not normal. And I.F.S has helped me embrace the gifts of that. And I do think I have a lot of help for business people. I have a secret passion of helping therapists build non-insurance based businesses and be entrepreneurs. I have not jumped into that, but I look and go, oh my God, I could help get you out of the $150 an hour routine. But I can be offensive to many therapists because I break so many rules. I'm still ethical.
There's a way to do it.
Right?
There's a way to do it.
Yeah. So,
well, Allison, thank you so much for your time. It's been such a lovely, lovely conversation. I will make sure that all of the abundance of services are linked in the show notes. And yeah, we would just really appreciate your time. Everybody listening, please feel free to reach out, leave us a review on Apple or anywhere else that you listen to this podcast. And please, please, please make sure that you go find Allison's book, find her on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Thank you, Allison. And thanks everybody for your time.